it's still intimidating to take action without seeing someone personally do it. And so go to your local RIA, find someone to learn from, right? That's what I did originally when I moved here years ago.
What's up, everybody? This is Mason McDonald with Dan Haberkost, and this is the Big Picture Blueprint. And today we are going to be having a fun discussion about what we would do if we only had $5,000 to restart our investing journey. And so I'm going to outline the scenario a little bit of we have a job, we're wanting to get started investing or starting our own business in real estate, and we only have $5,000 saved up to do it, but we're still making ends meet. But before we get to that, Dan, how are you doing today?
Mason, I'm great. Excited to talk through this a bit. I think we were both in a similar scenario at one point in time.
Oh, absolutely. I think, I got started with a lot more than $5,000 saved up, but I think a lot of people that are listening and a lot of people that are wanting to get started, and so many people that I know that have reached out to me have said, man, I want to invest with you, or I want to get started. I only have $5,000. And I'm like, that's not enough, to do it with me, but to do it for yourself, there's so many opportunities. So let's jump right into it. Dan, you are working your W-2 job. You are making your ends meet. You have enough money to go to Taco Bell twice a week, and you have $5,000 that you have worked really hard to save up to. What are you going to do? How are you getting started?
First and foremost, especially looking back, I wouldn't go out and try and buy a real estate investment to hold. I think that's ridiculous. That's something you do once you figure out how to make money. And we've talked about that on other podcasts. And so with that frame, what is the best way within the realm of real estate to start some sort of active business with $5,000 to scale your income? And of course, there's going and quote unquote wholesaling houses, right? Assigning contracts or flipping houses, or could become a realtor. There's quite a few options, but I think both of us would say that land, as far as we have found, is probably the easiest and most feasible with a small amount of money to get started in. What do you think?
I completely agree. I think with everything, getting started in real estate, there's not really a free way to do it. I know you hear about door knocking and people will have success doing that, and I guess that's free minus gas money, but land in general is such an easy thing to understand. It's such an easy niche within real estate to get deals, and you don't need too much money to start out with, to get started. So that's my route too. I'd focus on land.
Yeah, agreed strongly. And before we get into the tactical, well, you're working full time. How are we going to learn about it? How do we know where to start or what to do? I mean, land is a huge umbrella in and of itself. So what would you do with $5,000 as far as learning the business?
Yeah, I think if I only had $5,000, that means that, I might not have enough money to dedicate to a coaching or consulting program. I think that a lot of people would say, start with education, but luckily there's resources like this podcast, and there's so much free information out there in podcasts and YouTube and just using Google. And, with AI, you can ask AI how to do it as well. And I think that would be an interesting, thing to do. I have $5,000 to invest in real estate. How would I get started? Ask ChatGPT. But so I would start by educating myself of, okay, land is a low barrier to entry. Wholesaling is a lower barrier to entry, some of these places. And I would look up every single piece of information that I could find. And I'd spend about a month doing that. I would not spend more than a month doing that, because there's so many people. I mean, I listened to podcasts and YouTube videos for 10 years before I actually started investing. There's always more information out there. But I would do it for free. I would not pay for my education at this point in time if I only had $5,000. What about you?
Yeah, agreed strongly. So as a corollary to everything you said, so absolutely go and do that. Just about the entirety of what you need to know is available for free online. But it's still intimidating to take action without seeing someone personally do it. And so go to your local RIA, find someone to learn from, right? That's what I did originally when I moved here years ago. And he taught me much of what I know. And I just donated my time because I didn't have a lot of money at the time. So in conjunction with the books, the podcast, the videos, find someone to learn from where you provide them value and please, whatever you do not ask them if you can pick their brain or take them to coffee and pick their brain. If you use that phrase, they're never going to want to talk to you. Make sure that you approach it from the perspective of really just building a friendship and providing them value in the process.
Well, let's spend some time on that, because I think that's something that we hear pretty often is you should go seek out a mentor, find a mentor. And I think as both a former mentee, current mentee, and now mentor to a lot of people, nothing irks me more than people assuming that my time is for them. And I don't mean that in a narcissistic way. I don't mean that in a way of glorifying my own self-importance or anything like that. But I'm busy. I'm really busy. And whenever I'm not busy, I want to not be busy. And those conversations can be really draining sometimes. So say you're 24 years old, you go to your local real estate investor association meetup. How would you find that mentor? How would you find that person that you think, you could learn a lot from, but you could also add value to? Because you're 24, you have no skills, you have no experience. What real value could you add? I mean, and let's get specific. How did you develop your relationship with this individual?
Yeah, so that's what RIAs are meant for. They are meant for talking to people, so that's easy enough. You go and you talk to people. They're meant for networking. But then from there, at 24, you might have some skills. And so for me, it was that I had an understanding of technology that he didn't. He was older and did not grow up with the internet or the computer. And so I was able to help him there. On the direct-to-seller side, I'd go and get land for the builds he was doing. And he didn't know anything about pulling data or using PropStream or the different direct-to-seller techniques that are available to us today. So that was the way I was able to provide value to him. But you never know, and you're not going to know until you talk to people and get an idea of what they need. There's another example of just a friend I have in town who's miles ahead of me. And there are a lot of asks I would love to ask of him, but you don't approach it that way. You start with providing them something. And, after talking to him and getting to know him a little bit, he needed a good lender, and I was able to help him there. And he was very appreciative of that. And then what do you know? He's more available to me. And so you got to go and talk to people to figure out what they need, and whether it's providing them contacts or doing some work for them or helping them with anything that they might need help with. It really could be anything.
I think that what you didn't say there is what people should really take note of is you're not directly asking the question of how can I provide value to you in your business?
Yeah.
And because the answer when people say that to me is like, I don't know, man, like bring me deals, I guess, if you want. And because it's, I think Brandon Turner, I think about a Bigger Pockets episode from years and years ago. And he talked about how, you need to be able to add value without asking how you can add value, because the burden should not be placed on the person that you're seeking to receive value from. Mm-hmm. Where, what you're saying is talk to them about their business. People love talking about success stories, but man, do people love complaining. And whenever you hear constant complaints in their language, and maybe don't expect to develop this relationship after your first meeting, it might take a few months. And if you hear it's like, oh man, I have the biggest frustration with my maintenance technician that my property manager is using. They just do the worst work possible. I mean, you can go out, maybe someone in your own network, or you heard someone somewhere else that, is a maintenance tech that's looking for work and has great work or something like that. You could connect them and everything without them asking. And, sometimes it can feel like you're overstepping and you're trying to solve problems for them. But I think individuals will see, oh, wow, this person is helping me, and they haven't asked for anything in return. And just having those conversations can be so useful and so valuable, where stuff can turn into, you talked about it, Dan, of like turning into kind of a friendship relationship. And I would pay a lot of money for the conversations that I have with certain individuals that are much older, that have had a lot more success and have a lot more experience. And just getting to have those conversations in general make it interesting. So you have to have, certain knowledge of the lingo associated with it. And, if you're looking to invest in real estate, I mean, know the jargon, understand what's going on. And I'm not talking about the more sexy jargon that you hear on a Bigger Pockets podcast, like the Burr method and your ARB and all this kind of stuff. Just understand how a real estate transaction works. The process, for whatever deal it is and whatever type of business that they're doing, understand the difference between a developer and a builder and, just little stuff like that. So they're not answering questions that are Googleable whenever you're talking to them.
Yeah. One more quick point I want to make on that before we get too far off here is when you're looking to learn from someone, just like when you're looking to start a business and really in everything you're trying to do in life, take the longer term perspective. Stop being so, I need this today, transactional minded, because again, I have a friend I'm now doing some builds with where I met him over a year ago now. And right off the bat, it was clear that he had what I didn't and vice versa. He's great at building. I'm great at getting land at a discount. And we're both bad at the opposite thing, right? And so perfect opportunity to work together, but it takes time because doing business with people, you have to develop relationships. So here, over a year later, now we're starting some projects together. And just like with the people I've learned from, it wasn't the first time I met them or the fourth time I met them. It was over the course of months or more often years, you build a relationship, you end up being friends, and you help each other. And that's how learning from someone tends to work. So unfortunately, it isn't as quick as we might want it unless you're really able to provide value quickly in a very direct manner.
Absolutely. And all these people in the industry, they know that so many people that are getting involved in real estate investing are doing it from a side hustle. So if you haven't been consistent and don't have any track record in the industry, establish one. But with $5,000, Dan, all right, I know we talked about mentors, and I think that's a really useful component because you can do that for free. And, a lot of times if you establish it right, you end up getting paid, to have that mentor-mentee relationship. But you have $5,000, you maybe have found a mentor, you've listened to a lot of the podcasts about land and, flipping homes and BRRRR strategy and everything like that. But what are you actually going to do?
Well, these things should be happening simultaneously. And I can give you a good example of someone who did this with me, but I would already be pulling data and cold calling, but I'm a little bit jumping ahead there. You need to figure out a market and data, and we don't necessarily need to dive too far into that. But step one, along with the education and establishing the relationships with someone in the business, is just starting to take action to get potential deals. And so my thought, and then I want to hear your thoughts there, Mason, would be, start with a data provider. PropStream is what both of us use. Pick a market or two and decide on a marketing method. Being that you're low on money, I would start with cold calling and then go pull your first list and start calling, because I can tell you a great way to accelerate your relationship with the person in the business that you want to mentor you is to show them you're doing the hard work and bring them leads. But I'll pause there for a moment.
Yeah, I think that's a really good strategy. I think for me, I would, I think about it from like kind of a mindset perspective of putting myself in very uncomfortable situations that force me to take action. So I think first what I would do, I would go form an LLC. Right now in Colorado, I think it's free to form an LLC. Don't quote me on that, depending on whenever you listen to this, but forming an LLC is really, really easy to do. You go to your, Secretary of State website, form an LLC, you get your operating agreement, your articles of incorporation. You can do all that through, LegalZoom.com for $100 and have them do it and make it compliant and everything. So I would do that first and foremost, because I'm looking to start my own business. And I think I hear so often people will say, oh, I've been wanting to start a business, but I just haven't gotten around to forming the LLC. It takes 10 seconds to form an LLC.
I just did this. Yeah, it took me about 5 minutes for a new LLC. Yeah,
exactly. It's super, super easy to do. So I would form an LLC. I'd spend $100 to, form an LLC. I'd open a business bank account. Or I'd get my EIN, I'd open a business bank account, and I'd put that, $4,900 in there. And the reason for that is now I can kind of operate under an entity. Everything that I do can be deducted from it. I can keep track of my books and my expenses. So I would do that. And then I would do exactly what you said. I would search for a market. So if land flipping is what I wanted to do, and, and we'll make a separate episode entirely about this, but Dan and I don't really fund our own deals anymore. And I spend almost all of my money on the operating costs of the business. And if you're spending $5,000 to operate your business per month, you can create a 6-figure, 7-figure business if you're very lean in your operations. So I would choose a market, and I would find an area where I know that if I acquired land for a certain amount, I would be able to have a deal funder in place. So I would be looking for land that sells pretty quickly in the $20,000 to $30,000 range, and I would choose that market. And then I would go to PropStream and I would sign up for 1 month. It's $99, and you can pull 10,000 records. And I would take that market and I'd pull all the data that I can on that market, and maybe a couple markets just like that. And then I would spend all of my money on mail. And that's exactly what I would do. But we can break that down a little bit more. Dan, keep going on your track with what you would do, unless you're just going to copy me.
I would probably go the route of cold calling, but that can work too. Mail, either one. It's a matter of being consistent with whatever you choose. But one other point I'd want to make, since you're starting with limited capital, I would want to be in a middle-class market, like you said, and I would want to start working on the disposition, on the sourcing cash buyers ahead of time, so that I could profit even a little bit off of any sort of decent lead I get. And what I mean is, so for where Mason and I are in our business, right, if we're above 50 cents on the dollar, we don't really want it. We're generally in much more expensive markets. But shoot, if you're new, if you can do a $2,000 or $3,000 assignment, that's still worth doing if you only have $5,000, right? Your point of reference is a little different when you're starting. And so if you go to one of these markets where there's lots of builders and there's plenty of cash buyers, fairly competent people that you could assign to, you build out those buyer lists ahead of time, then you can monetize leads that he or I would be throwing away, where maybe you get it at 70 cents on the dollar and you can assign it at 85 or 90 cents on the dollar to a builder. And so that's something I would be intentional about. I wouldn't go market to an area if I was low on funds that is really expensive, where it's just end user buyers, right? Retail buyers. I would want there to be investors or builders I could sell to, so I could more easily monetize every potential lead that comes in that is at all below market.
That right there, it shows the difference in personality of, I think I'm lazier than you, Dan. And, I'm thinking about it from the perspective of, I'm working. I don't want to be cold calling in the evening, and you don't need to cold call. But Dan's right. Mm-hmm. Picking up the phone and dialing is really, really cheap. And so if you're taking this and you're breaking it down into like the technical aspect of it, of, okay, you sign up for PropStream for 1 month, costs you $100. So, $100 to start the LLC, $100 to pull that data, and you're going to get 10,000 records from that. And you can use those 10,000 records however you want. So, I would pick ownership criteria on the actual land that makes it to where they're more likely to sell, 10 years of ownership out of state, out of county, that kind of stuff. In those very specific markets, those middle-class markets where land is selling from anywhere from 20 to 50,000 per lot. And I would pick as many markets that I have a certain amount of familiarity with to get that data up to about 7,500 records. And then I would use the rest of that to do what Dan said. And in each market, I would filter for cash buyers of land in the past 6 months. And I'd pull that for those markets too, to get my 10,000 records. I'd cancel my membership there. And now you have all the data necessary to do it. And you've only spent $100. And so if you're going to skip tracing costs what? In between 7 and 12 cents per record?
I think because I do it at a small scale at a time, it's 15 cents a record, but it's very good. M as in Mary Power, is the site I use, and we found that to be very reliable, much more so than some of the other major sites.
Which is perfect. And so if you're spending 15 cents a record and you're going to, skip trace however many of them, say you're skip tracing half, what's that math? 5.
It's less than $1,000.
So if you skip trace 5,000 of them at 15 cents, you're paying $750.
Yeah.
So now you've got 5,000 people you can cold call, and you have spent about 1/5 of your $5,000 budget. So with the other $4,000, what I'll stick by and what I'll recommend, you send mail. For postcards, I pay 52 cents. For, standard typical like blind offer, 2-page or 1-page letters, I pay about 70 cents to 80 cents. So I'd send probably 2,500 mailers to those markets, to the best deals, and, maybe do a split test of blind offers to half and postcards to the other half. And then at that point in time, we've spent 2,500 times, let's say an average of 0.6, 1,500. So we've spent half of our budget. And at this point, you can be cold calling and you have mail going out. I'd get a website going too. And that right there, I mean, there's so many people that are in this business that's their entire business. They're spending that much money per month or less than that. And Dan, let's be honest. If you spent over the next 60 days, $2,500 to do exactly what we said, you're sending 2,500 mailers. You have 5,000 people you can cold call. If in 60 days, how many deals do you think you could get? At least one, probably, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're following our advice as far as middle-class markets where there's a lot of demand, where you can do assignments, you don't need quite as much of a discount necessarily, you absolutely can get a deal in that. And I wanted to give a quick example of, we're talking about doing some of these things simultaneously, or you mentioned, paying for education. I had a guy reach out to me. I didn't realize this till after the fact. He had been working a minimum wage job. I think he's 23 or 22. He's really young, younger than our example of the 24-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know this, but he, while living with his parents, working a minimum wage job, just listening to podcasts and videos, started cold calling and had gotten a couple deals. And just off the information off the internet. And then he paid me to give him my system, teach him the business in depth. And now he's really building a business out of this. And so, you can do some of these things simultaneously, or start with action on your own, make a little bit more money, accrue a little bit more in the bank, and then pay a mentor, or maybe even find one potentially just to work for and provide leads to, right? There's a lot of creative solutions, but I just wanted to use that in a real life example of someone I'm helping grow their business who was working a minimum wage job and got started just off of what he heard on podcasts and YouTube.
That's insane. And it just goes to show, and I think we have both the data and all of the anecdotal experience to say, like, getting started with $5,000, if you're effectively spending that money, you can turn that 5,000 very, not easily. It's going to take time, and it's going to take work, and it's going to take effort. It's not going to be a passive investment by any means whatsoever, but you could turn that money easily into 10 grand of, if the average sale price in an area is, 30,000, and say you got a deal and you got someone agreed to sell you their property for 10, I mean, you could assign that to any of those cash buyers for 15,000, and there you go. There's your $5,000 back. Or, you could partner with a family member that has 15,000 and you split it 50-50, and then there you go. There's 7,500 back. And I mean, I think it just shows how possible it is. I think you and I have, once again, a very similar approach to how we would get started. And I hope that people find this really helpful and very actionable. And we'll have links for, the tools we're talking about for PropStream and, Pebble for sending mail and all that kind of stuff. If you want to take action doing exactly that, get started and reach out and let us know how it goes. Because, I mean, if I knew when I was 22 that if I could start with $5,000 and if I knew these tactics and techniques, I think life would be a lot different. But then again, I could have invested in Bitcoin when I was 16 or something, and I'd be a billionaire.
Yep. No, I think that was well said, Mason. It really is simple. It's not easy, but it's very simple. And so really the only other thing I'd like to add to what we've already said is that you need to, from day one, be ready to be consistent over the long term. And so, deals are rarely gotten on the first or second call. There's a lot of follow-up required. And so just be ready for that, to follow up with your leads religiously, and you will get deals.
That's awesome. All right. This is Mason McDonald and Dan Haberkost with the Big Picture Blueprint, and we'll pick it up soon, y'all.